All right, lean in with me for a second. Why did a squad of officers salute the ragged gateman everybody laughed at? And why did a family try to bury a young woman before sunrise like she was a secret they had to hide? If someone told you the poor man at the gate was the only person standing between a girl and a marriage used like a weapon, would you believe them? That gateman was me. My name is Marcus, and for a long stretch I stood in a faded uniform at the entrance of Riverside Estate, logging plates, lifting the barrier. Nodding at folks who barely saw me and learning how the world sounds when it decides your worth by your shoes. I heard the difference in footsteps. Some people skim past like you're a signpost. Some drag their heels like the ground owes them something. And some, the rare ones, slow down just enough to say your name instead of your job. You can tell who respects you without asking. You can feel it like weather on your skin, you know what I mean. Let me lay it out straight so nobody has to guess. I wasn't at that gate because I needed the paycheck. I was there because money turned into a wall between me and everybody else. The more of it I carried, the less anyone looked at my face. I got tired of that parade. The suits that fit like armor, the watches that announced you before your mouth could, the rooms that smiled too wide at your last name. So I did something wild. I stepped out of the mansion and into a single room that smelled like laundry powder and old paint. I traded leather loafers for boots that squeaked when it rained, and I told myself I'd live there until I heard something money couldn't buy. A voice that cared when there was nothing to gain. Around the corner from the gate sat a small food place with a tin roof and plastic chairs that pinched your legs if you sat too long. The sign was sun-faded, the rice always steaming, the beans spiced with a patient hand, and the plantain sweet enough to make you close your eyes for a second. It belonged to a woman named Mrs. Ada. Tough eyes, quicker hands, and a voice that could cut through traffic. She ran it with her daughter Grace, who checked her reflection in the back of a spoon more than the pot, and with her niece Faith. Now Faith, if you blink you miss people like her, the ones who move through a room like they know its rhythm by heart. Hair tied back, sleeves rolled, a face that didn't perform for tips or attention. She saw the quiet things most people step over. She noticed that I never bought meat. The first day she asked me about it, I shrugged like it was a choice, and she looked at me the way honest people do when they know you're pretending to be Finn. She went backstage into that small kitchen and came out with the usual plate and tucked beneath the rice like a secret was a piece of meat. She leaned in and whispered, "Don't tell anyone." Pattern interrupt. One piece of meat, so what, right? But when you've been looked at like a number long enough, a small kindness lands like thunder. That bite tasted like someone saw me. Next day, same thing. Third day, same. I started timing my lunch to her shift. I noticed the way she wiped the counter twice, even when it was already clean, the way she learned the names of the old men who came to argue about football and politics, the way she glanced toward the door whenever the laughter got too loud, like joy had been punished in her house and she learned to hide it. If you've lived around pain, you can feel it before it speaks. Closing time one evening, I waited outside and thanked her. Not for the food, for the kindness. She laughed and said it was just meat, and I said it was not. She tilted her head, that playful smile people only let out when the world stops pressing them down for a second, and said, "Sure, you can pay me back when you become a rich gatekeeper." Yeah, that happened. I laughed too, tucked the line into the pocket of my heart, and walked home with my chest a little lighter. Life kept spinning like it always does. Cars in and out, deliveries, birthday balloons catching in hedges, neighbors waving over fences, a whole ecosystem of lives orbiting a gate most people barely noticed. And every afternoon, like a clock set by kindness, Faith slid a small piece of meat onto my plate and slid a little light into my day. You already know what happens when goodness gets noticed by the wrong eyes. It gets punished. Grace caught the move one afternoon, saw the meat land in my to-go box, and lit up like a siren. Some people audition for the role of town crier every day. She ran to her mother, and Mrs. Ada came storming out of that kitchen with righteous anger that forgot to check where it was aimed. She grabbed Faith by the wrist and dragged her across the street like she was hauling a lie into daylight. I looked up from the logbook as their shadows hit the gatehouse. "Marcus," she snapped. I stood up. "Madam, what's wrong?" She threw a greasy rag at my feet like a judgment. "You, lazy man, using this girl to steal from me to feed you for free. If you step foot in my restaurant again, I'll have you locked up." She turned and slapped Faith. Not a warning tap, a crack that rang like it had been practiced. My hands curled without asking, nails digging into my palms. But I had learned this lesson the hard way. When you wear certain clothes, people don't hear your words, they measure your pockets. I swallowed the heat, looked at Faith, and said, "Don't cry, it's going to be okay." It wasn't okay that night. Faith's uncle, the man who took her in when her parents died, met her with a belt. There's a breed of person that calls control care and thinks pain teaches love. He whipped her and declared she had shamed the house, and then he chose her future like he was choosing a shirt. Said she'd marry Chief Emma in 3 days. No conversation, no consent, just a decree. "If it were you, what would you have done?" She went quiet. The kind of quiet you learn when words make things worse. But quiet doesn't mean empty. The next evening, when the food place shut and the road went soft, she met me behind the estate where the shade cut the heat. She had tears she wouldn't let fall, and a voice steady enough to make you listen without blinking. "I've missed you," she said. And I said I'd missed her too, and there in the quiet I told her I loved her. I said I didn't have much now, but I would work, I would build, and I would give her a life that felt like breathing clean air. She squeezed my hands and said what honest love says: "Slow down, stand on your own first. When you're steady, we'll talk about marriage." I promised. Then my landlord called asking for rent. Timing can be cruel. I tried to shrug it off. She said she wished she could help. I told her not to worry. And that night, she lay on a thin mattress, staring up at a ceiling that needed paint, and made a choice that almost got her killed. She slipped into her uncle's room, took enough cash to cover my rent, and the next morning she brought it to me at the gate like a person smuggling hope across a border. I'll be honest. For a flicker of a second, I wanted to take it the way a drowning man reaches for any rope, but I saw her hands shaking, and I knew the price would be her skin. I pushed it back. "I can't take this." Why, she said, and I told her the truth so it wouldn't rot between us. "Because it's not yours." She whispered, "I did it for you," and I said, "I know. But love that asks you to betray yourself is a trap. Please return it before anyone notices." Pattern interrupt. That small refusal felt like nothing in the moment, but it was the hinge the whole story swung on. "Do you think that's fair?" She went home to put the money back and walked into a storm. Her uncle found it missing, tore through the house, pulled the cash from where she'd hidden it, and whipped her again. He locked her in a room and told her she would marry a stranger in 2 days. He called it protection, he called it discipline, he called it family. It was none of those things. By the next afternoon, when Faith didn't appear, a fist closed around my chest. I went to the back of their compound and tapped on the bars of her window like a boy begging a prayer to open. She whispered my name. "What happened?" I asked. "They locked me in," she said. "The wedding is tomorrow." I said a thing a man says when his heart writes a check his life will have to cash. "I'll stop this." She looked at me through the bars with the kind of honesty that doesn't blink. "How?" You have no money, no power. I took a breath that tasted like decision and told her the truth I'd kept hidden long enough. Tomorrow you'll see. You think you know how this goes? Man reveals he's rich, world bends roll credits. If only. Next morning, a black car stopped in front of their house, engine humming like a secret, and I stepped out no longer in a uniform that made me invisible, but in a suit that fit like a second spine and a watch that caught the sun. The air changed. People who called me boy yesterday went silent. Power has a smell. Oh. The uncle sat with a cup of tea, froze mid-sip, and stared like I'd grown taller in an hour. Mrs. Ada came out, Grace behind her, both of them blinking like the light was playing tricks. I walked straight to him. I came for Faith, I said. I want to marry her. He chuckled that cheap laugh greedy men practice in the mirror and told me I was a clown in rented clothes. He said Chief Emma already paid. He called me poor, louder than he needed to, like volume could turn a lie into fact, then told his wife to call the police. You ever see someone call the police to confirm their bias, and then watch their face when the uniform confirms your dignity instead? The van pulled up, siren punched off, 4 officers stepped down, clocked. My face straightened like a string pulled tight, and saluted. Good morning, sir. The uncle pointed and swore and told them to arrest me, and the officer turned to me, not to him, and asked, Sir, is there a problem? Mini call to action, stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. They offered to arrest the uncle on the spot. I told them no. He's learned his lesson, I said, but 2 days from now I will return with my family. Be ready. Then came the part that knocked the breath out of my chest. My father, Chief Richard, stood behind me like a steady tree, but my mother, Lady Isabella. When I told her who Faith was, where she came from, that she was an orphan who'd been mistreated yet still chose kindness, my mother's smile flatlined. She asked about schools and family name, and when my answers didn't shine, she said she'd never approve. Let me pause that for you. Do you think that's fair? My father leaned forward, and with a gentleness sharp as a blade, he asked my mother when he met her. Was she rich? Did she go to the best schools? Did she have anything but hope? She said no to all 3, and the room went quiet enough to hear the clock change its mind. My father said love sees what money obscures. He told me he was with me. My mother shook her head. I told her I respected her as my mother, but I wouldn't shelf my heart until it collected dust enough to look expensive. 2 days later, my father and I drove to take Faith home. The compound was wrong, quiet in a way that pricks your skin. The uncle opened the door with eyes red, but not in the right places, and said the words flat and cold. Faith is dead, buried already tradition. And then, I cannot dress this up, he offered me his daughter Grace as a replacement, like grief could be swapped out for a prettier dress. I felt every muscle in my jaw lock before I spoke. If I don't see Faith by tomorrow, you will regret ever knowing my name. Twist. There was no burial. There was a plan, and it stank. I called the police. Not because of my father's rank, but because someone had tried to make a girl disappear and call it culture. Officers spread through the city, asked the night guards who see everything checked. Stations listened to whispers. A security guard said he'd seen men carrying a tied girl into an abandoned warehouse. You ever hear your heartbeat in your ears, like your blood is pounding against a door? Let me out. That was me in the back of a police truck, as we rolled toward the edge of town, siren quiet, to keep surprise alive. The warehouse crouched like a throat that swallowed too many secrets, windows busted, weeds, pushing up concrete, a place where voices go to echo and die. 2 men at the door laughing. Officers hit them fast fists on concrete handcuffs, singing. Inside smelled like rope and oil and a lie left too long in the sun. In a corner on a chair, head slumped, ankles bound, was Faith. An officer tapped her shoulder like waking a child from a bad dream. "Madam, we're here, wake up." Her eyes opened slow, tears climbed out and fell, her body said, "Not yet," when she tried to stand. They cut the ropes and carried her into the light. Pattern interrupt. That breath she took outside. That is the sound I hear when people ask if love is worth the risk. If it were you standing there, what would you say first? The men confessed, quick fear loosening their tongues. The uncle paid us, one sobbed, to kill her. And there was more. After her parents died, the uncle had stolen their property. Not just paper theft, blood and ink braided. The inspector called the station, the city tilted, and the uncle and aunt ran to the bus terminal like motion could erase intent. The police were waiting. He went down thrashing at air and excuses. She dropped to her knees and begged mercy. Grace cried she didn't know. An officer asked one question that blew the smoke clean. "If you didn't know, why were you running?" She couldn't answer. They were charged. Kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy. And later, when the documents and witness statements surfaced, the murders of Faith's parents. Justice is slow until suddenly it isn't. Courtroom lights, people leaning in to hear the judge say the truth out loud, evidence laid down like bricks. The kidnappers spoke clear, the papers spoke clearer. The judge's face wore that look people get after swallowing too many bitter stories. 20 years without parole. Gasps in the gallery. I didn't gasp. I held Faith's hand and felt the tremor calm like a drum easing after a march. Back at the mansion, the house where I grew up felt like a place waiting for a storm to pass. My mother sat with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking, eyes on the middle distance like a screen only she could see. When we walked in, she stood, but she didn't come to me first. She went to Faith and took her hands. Pride had softened into something like humility. "I was wrong," she said. "Money made me hard, where I should have bent class, made me blind, where I should have seen. Can you forgive me?" Faith nodded, because kindness is stitched into her bones. But my mother kept talking, saying she'd confused status with safety, reputation, with character, and she wouldn't let that happen again. My father watched, smiling the way a man smiles when the house breathes clean air for the first time in a long while. There's a quiet that follows justice if you let it, and we tried. We picked a wedding hall washed in soft gold flowers that looked like they were holding light music that promised peace. We stood in front of people who had followed the whole story like a radio drama, and when the priest asked, I do felt like a promise I had already made the day I refused that stolen money. I lifted her veil, kissed her, and I swear the room exhaled. My mother cried, my father's shoulders settled like a weight slid off, and Grace, yes, Grace, sat near the aisle, eyes wet, because a few days before she found Faith in a boutique and asked for forgiveness. Jealousy, pride, all of it. She owned her wrong and asked for a shot at better. Faith lifted her off her knees and said yes, not because she forgot, but because hanging on to hate is like drinking poison and watching the other person to see if they'll fall. Years moved. I know that sounds fast in a story, but in life it's 1,000 small choices strung together. We built something that looked like a life and felt like a home. I ran my business with the memory of that uniform in my closet to keep me honest. Faith started a foundation for orphans and families caught between bad luck and bad laws. She sat with girls who learned to lock their voices behind their teeth and taught them how to taste their own names again. Grace went back to school, became a social worker, and began pulling other people out of the same kind of storm she'd once helped create. My mother turned into the loudest voice in any room when dignity was on the line. Funny how the world turns when you let it. Now let me put the part on the table that people argue about. If I hadn't been the commissioner's son, would Faith have been saved that fast? If the police hadn't saluted me, would the uncle's lie about tradition have stood long enough to bury the truth? And if that's the reality, that a name and a suit bend time, what does that say about the rest of us without those shortcuts? Do you think that's fair? I don't have clean answers. I have a memory. I have the feel of rope falling off wrists, the sound of breath coming back like a tide, the taste of one small piece of meat tucked under rice like a love letter, backdated by grace. I have a uniform that taught me more about power than every expensive suit I ever wore. And I have a promise I make every morning. Don't forget the gate. Don't forget the people who walk past it. Don't forget that a person is never a title first. Quick pattern interrupt. Would you ever hide who you are to test love? And if you did, at what point does the disguise become a lie? Some of you will say, I shouldn't have hidden anything, that love doesn't need quizzes. Others will say the only way to see clearly in a house of mirrors is to step outside with empty hands. I go back and forth. I know that telling the truth cost me convenience and gave me a life. I know that refusing stolen money looked foolish to some and saved the person I love. I know that privilege moved doors that should swing for everyone, and that makes my stomach twist even as I'm grateful those doors swung when they did. So let me hand this to you. Where do you draw the line between justice and mercy, between forgiveness and consequence, between using power to protect and using it to control? If it were you at that window bars, cold under your fingers, would you trust a man in a cheap uniform who said, I'll come for you? If it were you at that gate watching a girl get slapped for kindness, would you keep your voice low to survive? Or would you risk your job to speak? And if it were you on that street hearing the siren cut off as the van rolled in, would you believe that the uniform would see your dignity before they measured your pockets? I want your honest take. Was I wrong to walk away from wealth to test love like that? Or did the disguise strip the noise so I could hear what's real? Did the uncle deserve 20 years, or should mercy have had a louder word after the gavel dropped? And tell me about your life, a time you were judged by your shoes, your job, your last name, and not your character. Drop it in the comments, push back if you disagree, tell me where I got it wrong or what you would have done differently. If this story hit you somewhere, you keep quiet. Tap like so the algorithm knows it matters. Share it with someone who needs the reminder that kindness can change a life, and subscribe for more real stories told straight. Not glossy, not sanitized, the kind that start at a gate and end at a door swinging open. I read every comment. I'll see you down there.